bad stuff that is.
In today's video, I'm going to be doing a mains flush of our central heating system. Over time, radiators rust, and that rust gets into the water of the central heating system, which is what makes it go brown. And over time, this can cause build-up of sludge in your system pipework. The reason this is a problem is it reduces the flow rates in your pipes, can also block up radiators where you've got T's and things off pipework. It can block those. In your boiler, you've got quite fine pipework for the heat exchanger. You can get stuff stuck in those too, and it can end up causing pinholes in pipework where you've got uneven flow through pipes. So it's important to not let that sludge build up. To stop sludge building up in your system, you need to use an inhibitor. I've got Sentinel X100 here. This is what's already in the system, but the system hasn't had a full chemical and mains flush before. When I installed this unvented cylinder behind me, I did do a partial mains flush, but it hasn't had a full flush with chemical aid before. That X100 inhibitor has been in the system for about 18 months, so it'll be interesting to see how dirty the water is when it comes out, so it'll show how well the inhibitor's been working. The inhibitor basically works to stop the radiators rusting. I'm using this X800 chemical cleaner, so the benefit of this one is it can clean your system in 1 hour. There is a cheaper alternative, which is this X400 cleaner, but this one you need 3 to 4 weeks it to be in the system, and you need to have your heating on regularly. So that's why I'm going for the X800. The way this stuff works is it's a chemical cleaner that scoops up the sludge and puts it in a suspension in the water so that it can then be drained out and flushed out. So the first step is to actually just drain the system. You need to get all of that inhibitor out that's in there at the moment. Then I'm going to refill it with cold water and the X800. Then stick it on for an hour or so, stick it on high, get all the radiators open, get it circulating nicely, and then after an hour or so, drain all that out and then begin the system flush. What I've done in the past is just use this filling loop that I've got up here to flush from here. So this has a main supply to it. Basically open these up and it will add to the system, and then you just need to drain off, open, so that wastewater can come out. And then what you do is you go around each radiator, have them all closed, and just open each one individually, and then let that blast through, wait till the water goes clear, go and do the next one. First thing, switch your heating off. You don't want your boiler calling for heat when there's no water in the system. You can see we're currently sat at exactly 1 bar with the system cold, which in my opinion is optimum, but we're going to drain this off, so this should go to 0. You can just open this valve up with a spanner, but one of these universal keys is much quicker, especially in some awkward places. So just get that fully open. Not a great colour, not very much pressure either, which is a bit surprising. So I'm going to go and open up some of the air vents inside. So I'm just going to open the bleed valve at the highest point in the house. The other thing I'm going to do to help the system drain off is open up all these zone valves. So you can just manually open them by pushing back this lever here. When we fitted this, we also put isolators under here. So if you ever need to do any maintenance on this, you can just switch this off here, and then the pump side here, and then you can isolate just this bit of the system rather than having to drain the whole thing down. Just going to pop this radiator back on while the system's drained down. So I'm just in our tiny utility room underneath the boiler. So you can see we've got a drain off down there and another one there. And so we've got one on both the flow and the return. You can tell the return pipe is the one on the left because it's got this magna cones on it. If you haven't got one of these, I'd highly recommend getting one installed on your system or adding one yourself. It's essentially a magnet and a filter that, as the water's coming back from the radiators to the boiler, the magnet just picks up any bits of rust or crap floating in the water. We'll empty this one out and see how bad it is inside. It's been about 18 months since I emptied it. bad stuff that is. Now that we've emptied the heating system, it's time to put our cleaner in. So I've got the X800 here. One of the easiest places to put it in is the top of a towel rail, where you can just take a spanner and undo the vent, stick a funnel in and pour your cleaner in. Next job is to refill the system. I'm going to let it go up to 2 bar here in anticipation that I'm going to drain a lot of air out when I'm bleeding the radiators. A bit of higher pressure just makes it a bit easier and a bit quicker to remove air from the system. I've also got these automatic air vents here which should help it bleed air from the system. These are great to have for filling a pressured system. If you do install them though, it's definitely worth putting an isolator before them, because if you ever want to pressurise your system with just air to check for leaks, you want to be able to turn these off. And also these do sometimes get stuck if they get crud in them, so it's a lot easier to service it if you can isolate that and then just deal with this piece rather than having to drain down your entire system. Now all the radiators are bled, the pressure is still quite high in the system, but I suspect there's a lot of air that as soon as the water starts moving and the pump's on, it'll come out the automatic air vents or get stuck in the radiators. So I'm just going to stick the heating on. You can see all these valves have now switched themselves on. What I'm going to do is stick the pump on full, try and purge the system. Now that chemical cleaning has been going around for about an hour or so with the heating on full, it's time to drain it out and then mains flush, and then after that refill and stick our inhibitor in. The filling loop I've got here fills onto that 15mm copper pipe at the back, which goes onto the primary return there, and then cylinder tees in, and then it goes back to the boiler under there. So the problem is, if I were to just fill from the filling loop here only and then drain off from the return by the boiler, the primary return, I'm only actually going to be flushing a single piece of pipe. Whereas if I fill from the filling loop and then drain off from here, this is the return, so I'll still only be draining the return. However, if I close this lock shield, the water instead will come through this radiator from the flow side and then drain off. So that way I'll be flushing the whole system and not just the return side of the system. End up pushing water through more pipe work than is ideal, but it's at 3 bar, so it shouldn't be a major problem and still should flush the system out fine. Now, when you're doing a mains flush, you want to isolate each radiator individually. So close them all, close all the thermostats, all the lock shields and every single one, and then open one at a time, so you can basically blast the water through that individual radiator. Now, while the water's going through that individual radiator, it's not a bad idea to give it a gentle tap all along, and that helps to dislodge any sediment that's sat in the bottom. You can actually get attachments for an SDS drill which then vibrates the radiator, but those are quite expensive and not great for a DIY, so it's a very cheap rubber mallet will do the same. You just go all along, giving all your radiators a good tap while they're being flushed through. Unfortunately, it was heavy rain outside, so I didn't end up getting any footage of the drain off, but you basically blast each radiator through until the water goes clear, close it, move on to the next one. Once all the radiators have been blasted through, it's now time to refill the system, stick the inhibitor in, and then bleed out any remaining air. So I've got X100 inhibitor that I'm just going to stick into the top of this towel rail again. Next job is to refill the system. Always worth having a bit of tissue handy when you're doing this, just in case it sprays everywhere. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more.